afternoon. Your market news now. Asian markets traded mixed as investors kept an eye on the coronavirus pandemic and rising interest rates in the U.S. Chinese mainland shares rose, reversing earlier losses. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose 1%. Japan's markets are closed for a public holiday. Over in Europe, European stocks were choppy, with consumer prices having jumped in Europe and the U.S. over recent months. Last Friday, inflation in the Eurozone area hit a new record high in December, coming in at 5% compared with the same month last year. In addition, investors will be looking out for more comments on the timing of forthcoming interest rate rises from Powell, as the Fed chair is scheduled to testify tomorrow at his nomination hearing before a Senate panel. Financial heavyweights JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup and Wells Fargo will be releasing quarterly results. To take us through some of the dynamics that are playing out in the markets right now, especially as we get into the second week of trading, we are joined by Bright Khumalo from Vestec Asset Management. Bright, thank you so much for your time. So last week started off, I suppose, a little bit volatile. Did that give you a dose of what to expect in the coming few months, or how are you interpreting the beginning of the trading year?
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing else to expect from the market except volatility. I think it was JP Morgan who was, asked about, what's going to happen to the markets next when he was forced to, forecast markets at that time. And he said basically that if there's one thing I can assure you is that markets, will fluctuate.
Right. So how did the JSE and the RAND perform? Because, I mean, looking at so much of these, themes coming through in the markets, how's that filtering through locally?
Yes, I mean, we've had, like you said, a very volatile, interesting open to 2022. I mean, if you look at the U.S. markets, we're down about 5.7% on the S&P 500. And on the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 down just a bit from that. If you look at our local stocks, we were down last week, but I see today we're up about 1/3%. Resources are leading the charge there with the likes of Sibanye, Stillwater, and South 32, up 5.3% and 2.9% respectively. I'm seeing Sasol also on my screen at green there, but if you zoom out just a little bit, looking at 2021 numbers, we saw, the oil share was up 24% or 14% in US dollars, pick your number there, while, that compared to the S&P 500, which came in at 27%, was slightly lower, but we'll take, the positive numbers there. But going forward, it's going to be quite interesting on, how central bankers worldwide actually respond to inflation that we've been seeing surge up recently.
Right. So let's talk about oil for a bit. I mean, there's quite a bit happening, especially in that market, when you look at developments in Kazakhstan, when you look at what's happening in Libya. And then you have a whole host of these, I suppose, predictions about what people expect for the oil price. Morgan Stanley saying that they expect the price of Brent crude to climb to about $90 a barrel. Goldman Sachs saying that they expect the oil market to tighten quite a bit. What do you think will be the narrative for the oil markets, especially into the next quarter, as we see what's going on globally?
Yeah, I can't make any forecasts or strong comments on the oil price because I'm not an oil, specialist. But some of those issues that you mentioned, especially in Kazakhstan and Libya, with regards to limited supply, and obviously the current limited supply anyway is due to, the spread of COVID, the Omicron variant being I don't know, it's not potent, but it spreads faster. And the back end basically struggling at the supply chain there because of that, the oil price, across the spectrum from Brent, to crude oil surging and going up there. I think that theme is going to stick around as long as we figure out how to actually maneuver around, COVID and actually the supply chain issues that were brought about by COVID. So as we learn how to live with the virus, I think we'll see that Brent crude oil number come down, where we can get, the oil from point A to point B, where it's going to be used in those big conglomerates that need it to produce, goods and services.
You may not be an oil market specialist, but you are a long-term investor. So I got to ask you, what do you think will be the main themes for 2022, especially for long-term oriented investors like yourself?
That's quite a hard one as well, because somehow you asked me to forecast. But I can tell you that the Fed came out last year and said when inflation was slowly rising and said it was transitory, and then they changed their tune towards the end of last year to say they're removing that from their vocabulary, which means basically, as we've seen, inflation in the US, come from nothing to over 6.4%. In the last reading. This is going to be reluctant, and obviously market participants are going to be watching that number very carefully, and they want to see what the Fed is going to do as it prepares, to subdue those price pressures, which, like I said, are rising faster than expected. So inflation is going to be a theme that sticks around, and obviously we've seen also as a result, the value trade playing out quite positively in the few days of 2021, and they had a decent year last year where they printed 9.8% in returns, which is still very lower than the 27% that the S&P 500 enjoyed. But I think value might actually have a good year this year as compared to growth stocks. But don't put don't quote me on that one, because we're still seeing the likes of the bigger growth companies actually maintaining, their performance better than some of those businesses in the lower spectrum when you look at value versus growth.
Bright, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. That is Bright Khumalo from Investec Asset Management. Some of the news that people are looking out for today: the Atlanta Fed president will be giving his speech, and we also have Eurozone November unemployment rate also due this afternoon. That is it from me. More business news with Mzinga Glinta after the break. It's a goodbye.